Are your expectations of your investment portfolio realistic? Do you find yourself getting frustrated with your returns as they compare to a benchmark, like, say, the S&P 500? Then this is the video for you. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Julia, certified financial planner, and today I'm going to uncover the retirement investing lies that we are all susceptible to when it comes to managing our portfolios and why it could be hurting your retirement. This human error can damage your psyche and cause you to make poor investment decisions, thus lowering the overall quality of your life. I've actually endured this damage myself, and I've seen it in family members, I've seen it in friends, and even clients. This is a topic that frustrates both investors and financial advisors alike, and that is the concept of return versus risk-adjusted return. So a common theme that I've been hearing from prospects or friends and family members, and even from a few clients lately, is that their portfolio isn't keeping up with the stock market, and they're frustrated and confused about why that is. The fact is that everyone wants their portfolio to keep up with the stock market, but almost nobody is comfortable taking that kind of risk, nor should they be. Return is what investors focus on. However, investors really should be focusing on risk-adjusted return. While return is simply what your portfolio has earned, risk-adjusted return is what you've earned in relation to the level of risk associated with the portfolio. So without getting into the weeds of financial jargon, it's a way to measure how well your portfolio is doing based on how much stock you have. So if your portfolio is 70% stock and 30% bonds, then your benchmark, right, or what you should compare your returns to, should be a similarly structured portfolio, such as the Vanguard Target 2035 fund. You cannot compare your 70-30 portfolio to the S&P 500 because you can't compare 100% stock to 70%, right? The math does not work. Your asset allocation is going to dictate your returns, so you shouldn't expect a portfolio holding less than 100% stock to keep up with the index. Yet, investors do this all the time. There are also plenty of advisors, hedge funds especially, that claim they can beat the S&P 500 through their investment management. However, the data tells a very different story. This chart shows average annual returns from 2011 to 2020 and compares the average hedge fund to the S&P 500 index. The average hedge fund massively underperforms the market year after year, every single year in this chart. This chart that runs from 2001 to 2023 shows us how many active funds underperformed versus outperformed the S&P 500, and we can see that these funds overwhelmingly underperform. In our practice, there are times that our portfolios do outperform the market, even though they're not 100% stock. But this is fleeting. It'll last a month or two, and then the overall market will rally, and there's just no realistic way that a portfolio with less than 100% stock can outperform or even keep up on a consistent basis. Just last week, I was sitting with a client, a recently retired executive, and he reminded me of this concept. He said, "My overall portfolio is 65% stock, 35% fixed. And by this metric, we're outperforming." So basically, he said that even though he's not keeping up with the S&P 500, he's doing as well as he possibly could be, and he's looking at it in the right way. This is the right mindset that will keep him invested and keep his plan on track. He understands what his portfolio is capable of, and most importantly, that if we have a market crash or a prolonged pullback, he will also lose less than the overall market, which is the primary reason why retirees' portfolios are not 100% stock. But this video is not for the realistic investor. It's for the unrealistic investor who claims that they're conservative, right? That they don't want to take a lot of risk in their portfolio. Let's say they want, a 50-50 split between stock and fixed, but then they complain when their portfolio isn't keeping up. We've had clients call in and demand to go to cash because they're nervous or afraid that because of some news event or because the market's gone down or they think the market's going to crash. And no matter how hard we try to convince them to stay invested, as it's a crucial piece of their retirement success, they make poor emotional investment decisions. So in order for you to make the most of your nest egg, you need an investment plan and you need to stick to it. And part of that is having realistic expectations of your portfolio. It's just like your personal relationships, right? So if your expectations of your spouse or your friends are unrealistic, you're constantly going to be disappointed by your own doing. So now let's go over an example to illustrate how your risk tolerance and portfolio go together. So let's say that you have $1 million saved for retirement and you're relying on that nest egg to provide a certain level of income each year adjusted for inflation. You fill out a risk tolerance questionnaire, and in our practice, we use Riskalyze. And here's what it looks like. The first question is, how much risk can you handle over the next 6 months? I'm going to say 13%. I'm just, kind of picking random numbers here. But this means that I wouldn't want to make any rash or emotional investment decisions if I lost 13% in the next 6 months. But if I lost much more than that, I might. Emotional investment decisions are almost always bad decisions. I've personally been a victim of this. I've held on to an individual stock in my account only to almost lose it all. I sold and bought too early. All of these decisions and lessons that I've been through had given me incredible insight into what not to do when you invest. And I credit these lessons to our firm's success today. I've also seen family members and clients make emotional investment decisions, and I cannot stress enough how much this takes away from your general peace of mind. So to avoid this, we have our questions answer this questionnaire, and we have major discussions around how much risk they need to take versus how much they want to take, because by the way, those don't always align. All right, back to the questionnaire. Their next question is, what if you could improve that? So I can choose between that same reward, 13% for less risk. So instead of taking 13% risk, I'm taking 18% risk. Or I can keep my same risk at 13% for the chance to earn 20%. I'm going to choose the latter because 13% is okay with me if I have the opportunity to earn more. So now they push you again. Would you increase your risk to 16% to capture 4% more or 24% in return? I'm going to answer no because 13% is really my comfortable risk. Last question. Will I take a little more risk, 14%, for a little more return? No, again, 13% is my maximums. This questionnaire is designed to push you to see how comfortable you are increasing your risk for more return. Because that's how investing works, folks. The more stock you have in your portfolio, and I'm not talking about individual stocks because those returns are far too varied. I'm talking about index funds, stock index funds. The more you have of those, the better your returns will be on average. Okay, so they're giving me a risk score of 62 out of 100. So 1 means I don't want any risk at all, and 100 is, put my whole account in one individual stock or cryptocurrency. The S&P 500 is a 72 out of 100. So the computer has basically determined that I'm an aggressive investor, though probably not willing to be 100% stock in my portfolio. So now let's look at how my score can translate to an investment portfolio. I'm using our blended portfolio because the risk score is 60, so it's just under that 62 that I'm comfortable with. Full disclosure, in our practice, we do not always match our clients' portfolios with their risk tolerance. There are times when the client is just too aggressive or too conservative, and in order for them to reach their goals, the portfolio needs to be, altered a bit, structured a certain way. Okay, so back to the portfolio at a risk score of 60. We can see that in the next 6 months, I can expect for the portfolio to possibly lose 12.18% for the possibility to gain 21.55%. And that's a great risk versus reward. The average annual return over a 10-year timeframe is 9.37%, and the dividend is just over 5%. The expense ratio is relatively low at 30 basis points. The reason it's not under 10 bips, which is our growth portfolios, is because they have a lot of income funds that have a higher expense ratio in order to provide that higher yield. So the overall allocation is 64% stock, 10% bonds, and 26% income funds and cash. So now we know that we cannot expect this portfolio to keep up or outperform the S&P 500. When we stress test this portfolio against the market, we find that it's not going to gain as much in a bull market, but it's also not going to lose as much in a bear market. Now let's look at modeled performance against a realistic benchmark, which is 65 stock, 35% bonds. You'll recall that this portfolio is 64-36, so it's close enough. We can see that our portfolio has slightly outperformed this benchmark over the past year, the benchmark returning 15.94% and our portfolio returning 17.95%. With our management fee on top of this, and we'll use 95 bips, this portfolio's net return was 17%, which is still 1% higher than the benchmark's gross return. Looking back 3 years, you'll see more of the same. So this is how you should be looking at your portfolio's return risk-adjusted. Now let's use an unrealistic comparison, like so many do, where they're comparing their 65-35 portfolio to a 100-0 portfolio, right? Or the S&P 500. Okay, we can see here that over the last 3 years, this portfolio has underperformed the stock market. In fact, it always will over time, right? But in bearish years like 2022, this portfolio outperformed because it didn't lose as much. Here's the 1-year time frame where the S&P returned 24.24%, and this portfolio's gross return is just over 18%. So again, this is like comparing a condo to a home or your life to someone else's. Not only is it a false comparison, but it can make you feel bad about your belongings or your life or your portfolio for no good reason. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, why wouldn't I just buy the S&P 500 so I can earn as much as possible? Now, for a young person or anyone who's at least 5 to 10 years away from retirement, that's a great question. You probably should. I'm talking about someone that's close to or just retired. Having all of your money in the S&P 500 is not the way to go, and it's what those with little to no investment experience will ask. I've done several videos outlining the sequence of returns risk, which is the risk of pulling income from a losing portfolio. But there's also the mental anguish that comes with losing a substantial amount of your nest egg when you're no longer working and pulling in a paycheck. That mental anguish is exactly what leads people to make poor emotional investment decisions like selling low or buying high, or just getting worked up that your conservative portfolio isn't keeping up with the market. Of course it's not. Our job as financial advisors is not to outperform the market. It's to 1, take the emotion out of investing, 2, provide solutions to give you the best risk-adjusted return possible, 3, assist with tax planning and income planning, 4, helping with insurance coverage and cash flow, and 5, among other things, to educate our clients so that they make informed decisions. We look at the market daily so that you don't have to. So now that you've seen both the wrong way and the right way to look at your portfolio, you need to understand something. This is just a base guideline for a strong retirement plan, and the best advice needs to be tailored to your specific situation. So to help you take the next steps toward fully optimizing your plan, I put together a separate video that dives much deeper into everything I discussed today. In this video, I explain my exact system for building the retirement lifestyle you've always wanted. Just click the link below to watch it, and I'll see you next time.